The overarching objective of the project was to become the world's most accessible sports and entertainment event. We wanted to create this moment in time where people would come in and go, where do I go next? So we did that through creative content, things that you can't get on your TV at home. We're in a space right now where creativity is limited by your imagination. If you have an idea, somebody somewhere will work out a way to bring it to life. Our opportunity as a project is to lead that space and give value back to our community and build up our project into the future as well.
Hello, and welcome back to the Brand Next podcast. I'm your host, Justin Payton. I'm also the writer of Brand Next newsletter, where we dive in and explore the use cases that are driving both the adoption and positive change through Web3 and Metaverse technologies. If that sounds interesting to you, you can subscribe to the podcast using your favorite podcast service, or you can even subscribe to the newsletter at brandnext.substack.com. All of the links are in the podcast show notes. Today, we're really lucky to be joined by Ridley Plummer. Ridley has what I think must be an absolute dream job, and this is to say that he looks after Metaverse, Web3, and NFTs for Tennis Australia. So he's the person behind the Australian Open, moving into Decentraland, launching NFTs, launching POAPs, and all the amazing things that they did at the beginning of this year. It was one of the first big sporting events to launch in the space, and it was incredibly fun. This was one of the most fun conversations that I've had in a very long time, and while I love what they did last year, it also made me really want to go to the tennis this coming year. So I guess whatever they're doing, it's working, both digitally and in real life for me. But that's enough of me telling you what Ridley had to say. Let's listen to the man himself.
Hello, Ridley. Great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us. I just gave a little bit of an introduction to you, but obviously I never do that as well as you could do for yourself. So it would be great if you can give the people a bit of background on who you are, how you wound up here, and how you wound up kind of in this Web3 Metaverse rabbit hole.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin. It's great to be here. I'm Ridley Plummer. I lead all things Web3, NFTs, Metaverse, and cryptocurrency for Tennis Australia and the Australian Open. How did I get here? Well, that's a bit of a journey. It was a piece of paper that slid across my desk for a secondment on the 1st of November last year. I'd been at Tennis Australia for about 4 years at that stage and had been working in the commercial team across business development and business solutions, all the while dabbling with a little bit of cryptocurrency and NFTs in my spare time. A few of the executive team at Tennis knew that, as a few of us had been talking about it in the office. And when the opportunity came up to, I guess, lead a Web3 project or a Metaverse project or an NFT project, my name sort of popped up as the first candidate. And that was what feels like a very short sort of 10 or 11 months ago now. And then obviously between November and January, we were able to spin up a pretty amazing AO Metaverse and AO Art Ball NFT project.
And you did quite a lot there. I mean, that's a short period of time, and you managed to launch virtual world, Metaverse, lots of activations. Can you give, and I know that this is history and I've written about what you actually put together, but can you give a bit of background on what the project actually was and what the component parts of it were?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was two major parts to the project. One was our Metaverse build or a virtual rebuild of the Australian Open, and the other was our AO Art Ball NFT project. So the overarching objective of the project was to become the world's most accessible sports and entertainment event, whether that was coming on site in Melbourne at Melbourne Park in January, or someone being able to log into Decentraland and experience the AO in a virtual world and see all the amazing elements beyond just tennis that make the AO so unique, or even owning a piece of the AO or a piece of the AO court through an NFT. So the two main components, Decentraland was our platform for the AO Metaverse build, and then the AO Art Ball was a collection of 6,776 rendered tennis balls that were covered in artistic works. They were then dynamically linked to a piece of the Australian Open court that was about 19 by 19 centimetres in size. We followed 400 of the matches during the tournament, and each of the match-winning points from those matches, we took the Hawkeye data and combined that with the NFT of the plot that match-winning point landed on, and then updated that NFT in real time with some metadata about that match. So who was playing in that match, the tournament that was in, and the round that it was in. So we followed 11 of the tournaments throughout the AO, which was the men's and women's singles, the men's and women's doubles, mixed doubles, and then all the wheelchairs events as well.
6,776, did you say? That's a precise number? Is that just divisible by the court? How do you get to the number?
Yeah, great question. And a lot of people ask that question, how did you come up with that number? And I think what's really important through this whole project was storytelling, and that we were doing more than just creating JPEGs. And I think what a lot of people tie back to NFTs all the time is it's JPEGs, and what does it mean? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for the consumer? What does it mean for the brand? And storytelling became really important. So when we started sort of ideating how the court could be divided, we had to build an algorithm that divided the court perfectly equally. So every plot was identical, because the data that we were getting from Hawkeye was so incredibly accurate, down to the millimeter of the millimeter, that we needed to be able to tell exactly who owned that piece of the court. So when we built that algorithm, it was spitting out these different numbers, and 2,400, 5,300, 6,776. And then there was a big jump to about 9,500. And we thought that was too many. But 6,776 was this beautiful symmetrical number, 6776. And then as we sort of started saying that more and more, we were like, that sounds like a tennis scoreline, 6776. And it just kept building this sort of storytelling mentality that we came up with. And for that reason, we just went, it has to be 6776. That's the number.
It is the number when you say it that way. It is the number. And so many projects are built on lore and on stories. So it's amazing to see that you carried that through, even not just in the kind of NFT projects that are creative at their starting point, that are created independently as their starting point, but even from a business perspective, the starting with stories and starting with lore is an interesting point. But when you think about this, there's a lot of component parts. You were one of the first kind of big high profile sports engagements to do this. There's probably a lot of risk. Were there things that people were nervous about, that you were scared of, that people were scared about? What kind of pushed it over the line and gave everyone the confidence that this is what we need to do?
Yeah, there was a lot going on. There was a lot that could have gone wrong. In a very short space of time, we probably had a 10 to 12 week working window. When you throw Christmas and New Year's in the middle there as well, it's even shorter. A lot of sleepless nights, a lot of early mornings, a lot of late nights. Fortunately, we had an amazing team that was working on it. And we had a team of professionals who knew their running lane. And I don't think there was any point in time where anyone diverted too far from their running lane, or we didn't have any of those moments where we were like, there's too many cooks in the kitchen right now, we can't make a decision. Decisions were made incredibly quickly, a lot of gut feel and a lot of trust. I think there was a lot of trust put in our legal team, in our accounting team, in the design team, the contract team. Like, there was everyone across the board just worked in pure harmony for 10 to 12 weeks, and the lines of communication were unbelievable. We worked on a bit of a 12-12 rule, which was, if we needed a decision made in the morning, you had till 12 midday. And if we needed a decision made in the afternoon, you had till 12 midnight. So when you're going to the legal team saying, hey, you've got 15 minutes to make a decision, it's 11:45 a.m., they were really excited about it as well. And they genuinely bought into the project and the concept. I think I also had the blessing from our senior management team and our executives to make decisions on the fly. And there was a lot of trust put in me as the subject matter expert to make those calls. And if we ever had a moment where we needed to ramp that up, they were on the phone straight away. They'd pick up the phone, whatever time of the day it was, for us to make the decision, which was great.
That is amazing. It's good when you get the commitment from upon high in order to make that work. And looking back at it, or even at the time, how did you? Was there a model put in place as to how you would evaluate the success of this? How did you guys think about what was successful and what wasn't?
Yeah, I think in hindsight we probably should have, but I think we were just moving so quickly and not having those barriers, as I kind of often refer to them, probably allowed us to really flex and push the boat out on what creativity meant. And we were talking to a whole new audience of predominantly Web3 and crypto natives. We were also talking to tennis fans who we were trying to bring across to this Web3 space. We would then obviously had a big revenue component to it, but we never really had our eyes on the bottom line too much. We wanted to really push innovation and creativity. And I think we'd seen a lot of sporting brands and a lot of rights holders do things over the last couple of years that were a little bit rinse and repeat. We didn't want to form part of that group. We were also, I guess, guided by the fact that the tennis fraternity is a little bit fragmented. So you've got the ITF, the ATP, the WTA, and then all the Grand Slams, and then all the players sit below them. And they're all independently managed. So there's not really an option for us to create a NBA Top Shot 2.0 and mint amazing moments from Australian Opens of years gone by or Grand Slams of years gone by. We had to think outside the box where we didn't have to use the player IP. So that actually, I guess, allowed us to come up with the idea that we did and push forward with something that was, way left of field that no one, we don't believe, had ever really done before, particularly when you're tying in live on-court match data to NFTs and then updating them in real time. It was a bit of a game changer.
For me, that's what made it fascinating to watch, is you tied in so many different elements of so many different parts of the business and of the sport in real time. It was a really ambitious project. That said, some of the elements, I see a lot of people looking at areas like Decentraland now and looking at kind of the natural traffic that it gets. And being honest, that natural traffic can be quite low. Did you have any concerns about what that traffic would look like? Thoughts on how you would drive that traffic? How important was it for you to kind of think of the outside elements and what you would do around it in order to make that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we probably took a model similar to what we do on site at the Australian Open. So we don't want someone to just come once and watch the tennis. We want them to come 3 or 4 times. We want them to come with their family on day one and go to the kids' ballpark and enjoy that. And then everyone's exhausted by 1:00 and they go home and the parents go, "Oh, we didn't get to see any tennis." And then so they come back and experience dinner at Rockpool and have a nice date night and go and sit in Rod Laver Arena and experience the tennis. And then they see everyone having fun on Grand Slam Oval or at the live music stage. And then they say, "Well, I'm going to come back with the boys on Saturday, and why don't you come back with the girls on Sunday and have some fun at the music or have some beers and wines," whatever it happens to be. And all of a sudden, we've got a consumer that's returned 3 or 4 times to the same event for 3 or 4 different experiences. So we wanted to create that with the metaverse space as well. It wasn't just a place where you walk in and you would wander around for 10 or 15 minutes and see everything and then leave. We wanted to create this moment in time where people would come in and go, "Where do I go next?" And that's exactly what we do at the AO. They walk in the gates and they go, "Where should we go first? What's the first thing we should see? What can't we miss?" So we did that through creative content, and that was through wearables, live content, non-live content, things that you can't get on your TV at home. So one of the arguments that we kind of came up with was, why aren't we showing more live match footage in Decentraland? And I guess the argument to that was, you've got a brilliant TV sitting over your shoulder there that has the most crystal clear picture that you can imagine. Other than being in the stadium, you're probably going to watch tennis on that, but you can't choose your own adventure on that. If you go into Decentraland, you can choose your own adventure. You can go to the press conference room, you can go to the practice village, you can go to Grand Slam Oval, you can go to the player arrivals area, the stretch room, the gym. You can see what's going on in places that nobody else can see because you're not seeing them on broadcast, and you physically can't get into those spaces when you're on site. So we created almost this second screen effect that took people away from mobile phones, which is the traditional second screen, and put them into a virtual world on Decentraland.
I love that. I talk so much to the clients that I have and the people that I work with about the idea of making sure that our audience no longer feel like an audience; they feel like the protagonist. And it sounds like you really took that to heart and built that. That's amazing. Not only that, you've also convinced me that I really need to go to the Australian Open because it sounds like great fun. It sounds like a brilliant in real life experience too.
I think I know someone who can get you some tickets if you need.
I think I need to get myself down to Melbourne in the first instance, but this definitely sounds tempting. When you look at that, it's one thing to kind of talk about how you deal with the individual, right? But so many Web3 projects, when we look at them, their success is really reliant on community. And you talked about trying to bring in the tennis community, but that's not necessarily a natural overlap. I'm sure there is some overlap there, but how did you actually think about community in relation to Web3 and in relation to kind of the natural tennis community that you would have?
Yeah, it was important that we spoke to a natural Web3 community first and foremost. We made the decision early to go full Ethereum blockchain and make sure the project that we were designing was, I guess, crypto and Web3 native. We wanted to play in a Web3 native space and be known for doing that, not a Web 2.5-ish iteration that didn't feel like we were pushing the creative boundaries as far as we could. Going to that audience obviously comes with its limitations as well. We didn't feel that it was potentially strategic of us to go to a tennis audience and promote to them and try and bring them across. It was more strategic to play a fan acquisition role and go to the Web3 audience and try and bring them into tennis, which is what we try and do with the event as well. We bring music acts in, so we get music fans to come to the tennis. Years ago, we had an NBL match within the Australian Open, so we could bring basketball fans naturally into the Australian Open and entertain them once they get in the gate. So this was very similar. So we were talking about bringing a whole new audience to enjoy tennis through being literally connected to it. So yeah, I think it worked really well in that sense. And what we've done is create this platform to now talk to more tennis fans and bring them into Web3. So I think as our strategy evolves, we'll be more focused on, I guess, migrating a traditional tennis fan and giving them the opportunity to own a piece of the court.
I think that sounds fascinating. You're probably starting to think about that and ramp up for it right now. You've probably got the existing community from last year. Do you have plans on what the role of last year's community would be in terms of this year? Are you able to give us any hints as to how that community gets to stay involved?
Yeah, I think what's been really interesting to watch over the last 6 months or so is particularly in the market that we're experiencing right now, which is, I guess, a lot refer to it as sort of the crypto winter or a bear market that we're sitting in. And you do definitely see the engagement from the community disappearing and dispersing as the market is colder. So I think what we'll see in the next couple of months, and we are sort of starting to see it now, is that the community is returning knowing that the AO is the next cab off the rank as far as the Grand Slams go, and they're wanting to know what's coming next. And so there is a lot of planning going on around that. But it's important that we engage with that community year round. The Australian Open is traditionally really only relevant for 2, 3, 4 weeks of the year, and then it moves on to Paris and London and the US. So it's important that we focus on what they get as an owner of an AO Art Ball, or as part of that community, or as part of that membership token that we so often refer to as, that they've bought in. They're a part of a community now. And that's a bit more than just communicating with people in Discord. I think it's on us to leverage our network and our connections and our partners and And we do have an incredible network of partners and sponsors and just a general network into sport that I can pick up the phone and talk to someone on the other end of the world and collaborate with them on their next project, probably a lot easier than a lot of other Web3 communities can that may be more of your traditional, without offending them, JPEG mafia, if you like. So I think that's advantageous to me and the community that we've done collaborations already with Arsenal Football Club, for example, that they put up a heap of tickets and a heap of stadium tours and signed merchandise for us to raffle off to our community or hold trivia events to give those away. So it is important that you stay engaged with that community and they feel loved and they feel the benefit from being part of that membership.
But I can't get you to give us a hint as to what love they're going to get this year when we get closer, can I?
Oh, look, we've made a couple of announcements. Like I would encourage anyone that's listening here or watching here today to jump into our Discord. You can jump on artballs.io or search Australian Open Artball or AO Artball and you'll find the links. Some of the announcements have been around what the strategy is that we're working with going forward. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to be a leader in this space and focus on how this project continues to live long into the future and how we continue to benefit those OG holders that came on board early or have purchased a ball over the last 6 months to get into the project. And there'll be rewards that come with that. And that will be in the sense of someone who owns a 22 ball will automatically get a 23 ball. We want them to remain in the game. And we don't think it's on them to reinvest into the game necessarily. So, but in saying that, we'll need to keep some financial liquidity in the pool, and that may require us to release some more balls into the market. But they'll be different. They'll look entirely different. There'll be a 23 ball, and we'll also then have to remove our 6776 plots from the court and add another couple of thousand plots. So every ball will get re-rolled into a new position on the court. So the opportunity for people that were in less desirable positions, such as under the net or in the doubles lines, may now move into a more desirable place on the court and vice versa. So I think we increase the intrigue, we increase the gamification aspect, and we then extend it to the whole of summer. So it's not just the Australian Open anymore, it's the Australian Summer of Tennis. And there'll be some big announcements from Tennis Australia, if not already by the time this is published, about what our Summer of Tennis looks like and a little bit of alpha coming through there in a pretty amazing new event that will certainly be a world first.
Fantastic. And when you look at other sports, I mean, I say you were one of the first big events, but obviously there was what the NBA was doing, and they've continued to innovate. We've seen a lot coming out of FIFA and coming out of different football clubs. You know, have you seen anything that kind of knocks your socks off that you're looking at and going, these are the people we need to learn from? What makes you say, wow?
Yeah, there was a video that I saw the other day, and it was literally a teaser. And I think this is where we come back to storytelling. And it was a teaser for the Ballon d'Or project. And I don't know anything about it. I haven't had a chance to do my research on it yet, but it was one of those moments where I was hooked on the video. I was hooked on what was going on and what they were planning. That was probably one of the first times in the last 8 or 9 months that I've felt like I was excited about a project. I've seen some come and go through the last little while, but I think, and without sort of sounding like we're pumping up our own tires here, we set the bar really high for what sports can do with data in this space. And over the last 10, 20 years, we have seen this huge accumulation of data in sport, and there is so much of it now. And so much of it is used for gambling or gamification or whatever that happens to be. But there is literally millions of data points out there that any of the projects that are coming out from the likes of an NBA or AFL or cricket or whoever it happens to be or FIFA, for example, that's launching these, they have so much opportunity to use that data that they have literally at their fingertips and integrate that into their project. Even if it is moments, those moments can be tied to data and they can be driven into a fantasy sports league or something even bigger. So I look forward to seeing what's coming. I know I have spoken to a couple of projects of which I can't mention any names or even what league they play in or even what shaped ball they use. But there's some cool projects coming through, and I think people are pushing the envelope on what's possible. And some of the collaborations that I'm hearing about are pretty cool. And I think there's going to be some pretty interesting stuff come out, particularly in the next 2 or 3 months.
Well, you have me really excited at this point. I think sports is definitely one of the places that's innovating and really pushing boundaries in this space. That said, we've also seen some pretty big announcements from big brands recently. Most notably, probably Starbucks and the way they've kind of entered the space through Starbucks Odyssey. Just curious if there are lessons that you look at from kind of the brand side, or things that you can cross apply, or partnerships that you think make sense. But how do you think about brands in this space as they enter versus what you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think we probably I say, like, a lot of brands are dipping their toe in the water. We jumped in the deep end with a weight belt around our waist. There wasn't an opportunity to dip our toe in the water. And look, some have done it really well. I think like Nike and Artifact, Tiffany's recent release with CryptoPunks. We all know about Gucci and a few of the others that are out there as well. I think we appear in a list with quite a few of those brands that's been doing the rounds over the last month or so. But it's so focused on revenue. I think that's one of the problems with that list, is that it is so revenue driven. But when you look at the brands that are in that list, they've all got a couple of things in common. They're all very desirable, they're all very trustworthy, and they're all incredibly innovative. And I think that's where brands need to go. They need to use the trustworthy notion, but protect that at the same time. I have our chief, one of our chiefs' voice ringing in my ears all the time back from November, December: protect the brand, because we didn't want to do anything that damaged the trustworthy nature of the AO and Tennis Australia brand. But at the same time, innovation, like you mentioned earlier, and risk taking is what comes with moving forward in this space. So Nike, Gucci, Tiffany, Starbucks, all of those, they're all taking risks, absolutely, in this space, but they're doing it the right way. We've seen brands, and I won't name any, but there's been brands and leagues and rights holders out there that have gone about it the wrong way. And I think we see the media and the fans and their communities tear strips off them for it. And they'll forever be known in this space as the brand that did X, or they did this, or they stuffed up in this way. So I think could it be and should it be are really important questions to ask for a brand when they're jumping into this space. And just because it can doesn't mean that it should.
I think that's a really important lesson. I think we see a lot of projects right now that try to do things just because they can, and I think that we always need to remember the lesson of kind of responsibility and trust. And I think that's a really, really great lesson to take.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, just to add, we're talking about brands' consumers here. We're not just talking about the brand. Like, we're also talking about your consumers that are going to invest into this product, or they're going to run away from it. And I think we need to not only just protect the brand, but protect our consumers as well. They're such an integral part of what we do. And we should ask them what they want in this space. Like, so many brands just go and say, we can do this, let's go and do it. But talk to the consumer. Like, they know what they want from your brand.
100%. Do you have a view, just one or two predictions of where you think this is going to go? I think we've seen this space kind of move so quickly and evolve so quickly, and new use cases just keep coming. But what have we not seen? Where do you think this goes in 1 or 2 years? You pick the time frame. You tell me.
Yeah, I think probably 2 to 3 years is a good time frame. I think we need a major brand like a Starbucks or an Amazon or an eBay or PayPal, whoever it happens to be, to move mountains in this space and really be at the forefront of how that comes to life. And that's going to be that mass adoption moment. I think we saw it with QR codes 2.5 years ago. If we never see a QR code again, it's okay. QR codes have been used for 10 or 15 years. They just weren't used necessarily in the correct way, or the average everyday consumer didn't have the resource or the hardware to use the QR code. A lot like I think I used the example of credit cards with you last week. 25 years ago is probably where we are now in a credit card comparison. They were difficult to get. Not many people had them, and the user experience was really clunky, literally. Like, you put the card in a machine with a carbon copy piece of paper and went click clack on it, and then someone took it to the bank and the business got its money 5 days later. And then over time, technology improved to improve the user experience with that. We got stripes and chips on the card, and then the FPOS machines got bigger and better, and they got RFID and NFC, and then that all got smaller and smaller, and then eventually it was in your phone, and now it's in your watch. I don't think any of us thought 20, 25 years ago that you'd have your credit card in your watch. That all relied on physical technology and hardware, whereas in this Web3 space, we're working with digital tech. Nothing requires really introduction or improvement of physical hardware. So it can move really quickly. And I know from working on this project how quickly the teams can move. No, they don't always want to move at that pace, and it's not reliable to do that, but nor feasible. But when someone has an idea and they want to bring it to life really quickly, these guys move at incredible pace, and it'll just be that consumer adoption that is probably the slow part. But I'd say within 2 or 3 years, once everyday consumers get a better understanding of what the tech can do and what the possibilities are, particularly when you talk about the migration from Web 2 to Web 3 and connecting your wallet to a website and how easy that user experience is. I don't think we're too far away.
Well, I can't wait to see the size of your community then. So I'm optimistic about the 2-year event horizon. I hope that maybe I'm just hopeful. A bit of hopium is always good.
Absolutely.
So look, I really appreciate your time. I think this has been super interesting. You've given us a lot of insights about how you got where you are. I'd love to just kind of ask a few questions to wrap up a little bit more about you. Obviously, as the lead on an NFT and a metaverse type project, I assume you had some NFTs to begin with. I'm just curious, what was the first NFT that you bought for yourself, and do you still have it?
I guess the thing that sort of got me in was a bit of intrigue. I think it was a natural progression from sort of being in crypto a little bit, and then sort of seeing this digital, I guess, ecosystem evolve and the use of blockchain to underpin it all. And I think even back to sort of some of the things I was saying earlier on, a lot of people lose sight of what's actually happening below the surface. And the media and a lot of people that are talking about it are talking about apes that are selling for $300,000 and what is that? But what's actually happening below the surface is what's, I think, important. And there's a lot of programs that people are using in their day-to-day that are using blockchain technology and they just don't know it. I think for a lot of people, it's scary words like NFT and blockchain and cryptocurrency, and they straight away put up the walls and barriers because it is a bit of an unknown world. But in reality, they've probably already used it in some senses a couple of times through that day or their week, just not knowing it. My first was actually in NBA Top Shot. So like a lot of people in this space, Top Shot was my first kind of introduction to the world of NFTs. And having been a avid basketball card collector when I was in my probably, I don't know, between 5 and 15, maybe, when I was playing basketball at a low level, that was part of a hobby of mine, really. And then I actually picked that up a little bit again through COVID. And it was sort of a hobby to take up when we weren't really allowed to do much else. And then I was sort of matching up this physical world with this digital world and the collectible aspect of that. And obviously there's both communities that come with that. There's a very, very large community of physical collectors and a very large now community of digital collectors as well. And I was sort of monitoring both and what was happening between both and the experience and how people changed and exchanged communications and whatnot. And it was quite interesting. Whether I've still got the very, very first, I'm not entirely sure because that collection evolves at all times. I think my Top Shot collection is probably somewhere between 250 and 300 units at the moment. There was a lot of early mornings. They were often dropping them at like 3, 4, 5 a.m. Australian
Yeah, it's the
time.
disadvantage of being in Australia right there.
Yeah, it was a real. You had to be passionate about it. I'd often be sort of waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning to try and get into a drop, and it was really hard to get into a lot of those drops. But it was probably that desirability that kept people coming back because they wanted to get in there. And then I guess from that sort of what I would call a more traditional Web 2 or Web 2.5 version of NFT collecting, sort of moved into more Ethereum based, and got myself a digital wallet, a MetaMask to be more specific, and then started minting through some collections and sort of seeing what was happening there. And I've probably got a bit of junk in there, as I think any NFT collector has. And there's a bit of advice that goes with that as well. I guess it's like for anyone that wants to get in or is interested, talk to your friends, talk to your family, find out the mistakes that they've made along the way, and what are their tips and tricks to sort of get you into starting a collection. I guess through that collection, I've got a couple of things in there that I'm really tied to, a couple of communities that I'm really engaged with and really looking forward to seeing where they go in the future, whether that's through the artist that has created the artwork, the storytelling that goes along with it, or the community, or just out of pure interest. I own a piece of land in the other side, so Bored Ape Yacht Club, Metaverse. I'm super curious to see where that goes. It was probably the only accessible way for me to get into the Bored Ape Yacht Club community. By the time I was sort of getting well into the space, Bored Apes and Mutant Apes were well beyond my reach. So that was an opportunity for me to enter that community, which I think it was probably the reasoning for a lot of people investing into that as well. But yeah, very curious to see where some of it goes, and hopefully, I guess our opportunity as a project is to lead that space in a lot of ways, and hopefully continue to give value back to our community and build up our project into the future as well.
Well, your passion shines through pretty clearly, and I believe that the project that you run really has inspired a lot of people to pick up the mantle and see what they can do. But kind of as a last question, I'm curious. You might have this passion within yourself, but we all need to find inspiration somewhere. Where do you look? What do you look for to find that inspiration and to kind of push your thinking?
This is a great question. We're in a space right now where creativity is limited by your imagination. And if you have an idea, somebody somewhere will work out a way to bring it to life. There are so many like-minded people in the community, particularly this sort of Web3 community, and it's such a giving network. I think that's what's been really refreshing, and I will get to the answer, I guess, but the ability to get in contact with someone, like I said earlier, from another Web3 project or an NFT project or a league or a rights holder, and ask them about what they're working on, or give them some advice because they've contacted me, or connect two people from two very different worlds or communities because we share a passion. I think that then opens up these doors for creativity as well. And so the answer's not going and walking along the beach and seeing a beautiful sunset and coming up with an idea because I saw that. It's actually like talking to other people in the community about what they want to see. What are their expectations from projects? What have they seen in the market that they're like, hey, Rid, you've got to go and check this out. I saw something amazing. Or I spoke to this lady from this club the other day. I'm going to introduce you to her because I want you guys to talk about what this could become. And that's super exciting. It's almost that what gets you out of bed in the morning moment, and who's that next email or DM on LinkedIn going to come from. And like, I get so many of them. And when you see something that really excites you, it's that opportunity to go, hey, we should collaborate, or I'll introduce you to these guys because I know they can bring your idea to life. And so the network ability of this Web3 community is super refreshing. It's a very giving mentality, which I think opens up a lot of communication, a lot of ideation. And like I said, in this space, creativity is limited by your imagination. And if some people come up with some great ideas, someone will bring them to life.
Well, I think that's a fantastic ending note. I really appreciate your time. I can't wait to see where your creativity takes us with AO 2023. And so thank you very much. And hopefully we can talk again after the launch and get a little bit of an update then.
Thanks for having me, Justin. Great to chat.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Ridley.
Thank you for joining, everyone. That was Ridley Plummer telling us all about how the Australian Open is innovating in the world of Web3 and what this means for sports. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Maybe it even got you excited to watch some tennis or go to the AO grounds in the Metaverse when they get back to playing next year. I can't wait. But now, the closing notes. You've been listening to the Brand Next podcast, where I talk to the builders, innovators, and leaders who are scaling Web3 and working to ensure that it delivers on its positive potential. If you enjoyed listening, you can subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like listening to podcasts. If you really enjoyed the show, please do give us a 5-star review. It can only help. If you want to find out more, you can subscribe to the accompanying Brand Next newsletter at brandnext.substack.com. The links are all in the show notes. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, take care.